Hey guys, welcome to lesson 1. One of the most common misconceptions about conversion tracking is that it only works for purchases made online. But in reality, a conversion is any meaningful action that's completed by a visitor on your website. So something as simple as subscribing to your blog, downloading a white paper, or even just viewing an important web page can be tracked as a conversion. All you need to know is the actual URL of the page that says, okay, that was a conversion. If they get here, that URL to this URL to this page, that's a sign that, that's something I want somebody on my site to do. So that can be a conversion. And for most non-e-commerce businesses, you're mostly going to be tracking leads as conversions in the form of form submissions on the landing pages. It can also be in the form of phone calls, like I said in this intro lesson. But in order to track conversions, you need to create a code and insert that code onto the URL that is your success page, your thank you page, the page that says, this is the action I wanted them to take if they make it here. So if you have multiple conversions, you're going to need to install these steps that I'm getting ready to walk you through. There's a code. You're going to need to install that code on each of those pages. So just to give you a real quick rundown here, you're going to be placing code either on these pages, or the other alternative is you can set up Google Analytics goals and import those. So in this particular lesson, I'm going to show you how to place the code on the confirmation page, and then in a later lesson I'm going to walk you through how to set up those goals and import them into AdWords as a conversion that way. So before we get started, there's a few things that you'll need to make sure you have in place. First, you need to make sure that you have access to the back end of the website or landing page where we need to place these codes. So there is that requirement, and sometimes if you're sending traffic to your website and you don't control your website, you'll need to talk to your webmaster, your developer, whoever helped you set up that website and has access and knowledge of the back end. That's who you're going to need to talk to, because in order to do this step, you do need that access and knowledge of how to place that code. Now, it's not too technically difficult, but you do need to have access. The second thing you need is a thank you page. So if you have a form submission or you have something, some other action that you're trying to track, you'll need a page that the user, the visitor, is redirected to after taking that action, after submitting the form, whatever the action is. We need to place a code on the page they wind up at afterwards. So that is what typically is just referred to as the thank you page or the success page. So now that you guys know what you need and what's required to actually walk through these steps, I'm going to go ahead and hop over into our test account. Remember the LASIK test demo that we set up in the last module? I'm going to go through and do a conversion tracking setup for this account. So bear with me just a second. I'm going to switch over here and log into our AdWords account. Actually, I've got it pulled up already, so it makes it faster. All right, so now we're inside our account here, and I am in the new AdWords experience. I'm in the new interface. So if you guys are still using the old interface, I am going to do some of these videos. I'm going to record some separate videos where I'm walking through in the old interface, and in some of them I'm going to walk through in the new interface. So I'm going to do it both ways. So if you guys are watching this lesson and you prefer to use the old interface, just go and look for my video on, I'll just label them as new interface or old interface. That way you can follow along and it'll look the same. But honestly, it's not really all that much different. So you'll be able to catch on even if you are using the old interface. Okay, so what we want to do is we want to set up conversion tracking. We have this one campaign set up here, and obviously we're not running any traffic yet because we don't have our conversion tracking set up. So this is my LASIK campaign. I'm going to go ahead and jump in there. From this screen, if I want to set up my conversion tracking, I'm going to go up to this little tool icon right here. So in the old AdWords, there was a tools menu. There was menus at the top, if you remember, and that's where all of these items lived before. And now it's just buried under this little tools icon. So from here, we're going to go into the measurement menu, and we're going to click on conversion. Okay, once you're on this screen, you're going to go ahead and click this button here that says Add Conversions. Then you'll be presented with 4 options where you can pick the type of conversion that you want to track. Now I'm going to explain all of these in later lessons, but for right now, since we're just doing our basic conversion tracking for the website where I want to track a form submission, I'm going to go ahead and click Website. Now you'll be taken to a screen where we can complete the details for this specific conversion. So in our campaign, in our LASIK campaign that we set up, we were driving traffic to various pages. Primarily the end result that we wanted a visitor to take on that website was for them to complete a form to request a free quote. So I'm going to name this as Request a Quote. So they're going to request a quote and to find out what the cost of a LASIK is. And on that call, when they call in, then they're going to try to get them to schedule a consultation. Now we'll actually set up one more conversion action for this LASIK campaign that is request a consultation. Because again, for this campaign, there are multiple types of actions or conversions that I want these visitors to be taking on the site. So either one would be considered a conversion. So for now, I'm just going to do request a quote. And then under, and you can name this whatever you want, but just make sure that you're naming it something that is very easy to spot, and this is going to be showing up in your reports. So if you're doing this for like a client, say as an example, you want to make sure it's very clear what this action actually is. And so you can even do request a quote form submission to make it very clear what it is. And the category, you're going to choose a category. So again, you have purchase and sale, sign-ups, leads, view of a key page. All these things that we talked about before are options of what this type of conversion is. It doesn't have to be, excuse me, it doesn't have to be an actual form submission. It could just be that someone viewed a specific page and that was the action you wanted them to take at that point, and maybe you're going to then start remarketing to them or something like that. But in this case, what this is a lead. It is nothing more than a lead, just someone calling to get a price. So then we're going to go here to this value section, and this allows you to assign a value to each conversion. Now, for a lot of businesses that are non-e-commerce, you might say, well, I'm not really sure what the value of a lead is. And a lot of businesses do know this number, and like I said, some of them don't. If you don't, that's okay. You don't have to use a value here. But if you do know the value of a lead, so if you've walked through all those numbers like we've talked about, and you understand how many leads it takes to convert to a consultation, and then you understand how many of those consultations convert into an actual patient, if this LASIK provider knew his numbers, then I would ask him to tell me what the value of a lead is, or I would at least be able to help him figure that out. You know, so it might be like $50 based on how great or not great his conversion rates were at each stage. It might be $200, it might be $500. So this will be different for every business. You have to figure these numbers out for yourself. And I do encourage you to use our ROI calculator, which is available in the members area. You can just click on it and it'll pull up this spreadsheet where you can solve for this number to find out the value of a lead. For now, I'm just going to mark this as don't use a value because I don't know for sure what it is for this client. But if I did know, like I said, I would use the same value for each conversion since this is a lead. And I would enter in whatever they told me or whatever we figured out. You would set the currency and then you would enter in the number here. So say it was $200. You would enter that in there. If it was something where there could be different values for each conversion, you can enter those here, and then you have to just make a quick modification to your tracking code. But I'm not going to cover that right now. I'm just going to mark as don't use a value. And then under the account section, this is something that gets forgotten quite a lot. I see when I go into audit accounts, and a lot of times with non-e-commerce, this will be set to count every conversion. So what this is it's just saying, okay, how many conversions do you want to count per click or interaction? And what that means is if someone submits a form and they land on that conversion page, which is their thank you page, they're going to submit the form, and it's going to say thank you for submitting the form. Somebody's going to be back with you and just shortly, something like that on the landing page or on the thank you page, sorry. If they refresh that page, if for some reason, they came back to it, they saved it or refreshed it, or they submitted the form again, well, technically to you as the business, that's just still one person. That's not two conversions technically. It would really mess up your data if someone was doing that and it was counting it as another conversion each time, because it's just still the same person, and they even if they submitted the form twice, to you it's just one possible conversion into a client, if that makes sense. Now, the times that you would mark so in our case, we would mark just one. We only want to count it one time. Now, when you would mark every is if you have an actual e-commerce transaction happening. Because someone can come through and buy two things, and you definitely want to know if they bought two things versus one. And they could get to that conversion page or that thank you page multiple times, and it definitely adds value each time and is unique. So in that case, you would use every. But for now, in our case, because I'm tracking form submissions and these are just leads, they're just people, then I'm going to use the option 1 here. So we'll want to set that. And then down here you have some additional settings. They have a default conversion window set for you at 30 days. I typically just leave this default in here, but you can change it if you want. And what this does is it just tells you how long AdWords is going to continue to attribute conversions back to your advertising campaign or your ad according to that first click. You can set it to as long as 90 days or as short as a week. Like I said, I typically like this 30-day window. It works pretty well, but you can set it for longer if you'd like. And then you have this view through conversion window, which is basically it's allowing you to see how long a view through conversion could happen after an impression. So basically that's what happens when someone just sees the ad and they don't necessarily click on it, but they did have an impression of the ad. You can track what happens after they had that impression, but they didn't necessarily click. So that can come in handy as well. I typically change that to like 3 days or sometimes even a week, because you're just trying to think through, okay, if someone just had an impression of my ad, how big of an impact do you feel like that was on your prospect, and so typically this is a lot shorter window than the actual conversion window. And then down here you have the option to include in conversions, and sometimes there are things that you may put in here that you'd like to track, but you may not want to actually include these as actual conversions. So a common example would be like a particular page that someone is viewing. You want to track that, and you want to track that they viewed that page, but it may not be an actual conversion as far as like something you want to show up in your reports as showing as a conversion. So you can choose to leave it out so that it won't optimize for that particular action, and the smart bidding, etc., isn't going to take it into account as a conversion. So like I said, sometimes this can come in handy. And the final option here is the attribution model. And for the attribution model, it's defaulting to last click. So what this means is, how is it attributing credit basically for the conversion according to the click activity of the user. And what it's saying here by saying last click is that the last place that the person clicks before they convert is given the attribution is attributed to that ad. So that's the different attribution modeling possibilities you can see there in this drop down. And I'm actually going to be recording an entirely separate lesson to talk about attribution modeling because it is a little bit more advanced topic. But for now, for the sake of just setting up our basic conversion tracking, we're just going to leave this as last click and we're not going to change that. So once you have all your settings done, we're going to go ahead and click Create and Continue. So once you've created your conversion tracking item, now you've created it. It's actually called an action, and now you can go ahead and add the tag to your website. So in this step, what you're going to be getting is some actual code, and you have two options. You can install the tag yourself. So you're going to actually get the code itself, and you would need to then either get it to the right person on your team, your webmaster, your developer, or if you are comfortable with going ahead and installing that code snippet, you can go ahead and do it yourself. And your second option is to use Google Tag Manager. And Google Tag Manager is something I'm going to also be covering in another lesson because it's a whole world all on its own for analytics and tracking. It's a very robust tool. So I'm going to cover that in a later lesson. And for now, we're just going to click on this option here that allows you to install the tag yourself. So what you're doing is you're installing conversion tracking just for this specific request a quote form submission conversion action that you just set up. So this is not setting up conversion tracking for everything or all conversions or anything like that. It's just for this one conversion. So if you need to set up multiple conversions, you're going to have to install multiple tracking codes on the different pages that you want to track. So we're going to go down here and we're going to choose, so basically it's asking you if you've installed the global site tag. So that's something you'll need to go ahead and do first. So if you have already installed the global site tag on your website, so like for example Google Analytics, most people have that installed, then you don't have to install that global site tag. So you would just choose I've already installed that. So I'm assuming that you already have that in there. And if you don't, then in another lesson I'll show you how to do that. And so you've got that. If you don't, it's going to tell you how to download that code snippet and get that in there. And then the actual event snippet works along with the global site tag to track different actions that you would count as conversions. Now there's two different options. We've talked about different things like URLs, thank you pages, success pages, and things like that. So that means page load. So basically you're telling Google that if this page loads, like the thank you page, then that's the thing that you want to track. But there are times when there is no page load that happens for an action you want to track. So in that case, you can use a click as an option, and it'll give you the snippet below that you can paste right onto your page where the action happens if you want to track for clicks. Otherwise, the most common example or the most common scenario is the page load. So this is going to be a snippet right here that you can just highlight and copy, and then it gives you instructions right here for what you're going to do. You're going to paste it into the head tags of the page you'd like to track. So again, this is why I mentioned earlier that if you aren't familiar with code or you don't feel comfortable placing this code snippet into the actual code of your page, then have someone help you who is a developer, is familiar with that page. But I'll also tell you this, if you're on one of the most, the popular landing page platforms out there, they have a really easy way to go in and add this yourself, like Instapage, ClickFunnels, lead pages. They all have a little area in the settings where you can go in and just copy and paste this code, and it'll tell you that this is where you put the tracking for the head tags. So it'll make it really, really easy. And I'm going to include a download that shows where this setting is for the most popular landing page providers. And then if you're in something like WordPress and you're sending traffic to your website, you'll need to work with your developer or whoever developed your website and just tell them you need to put this in the head tag, or you can use some really common conversion tracking AdWords plugins that make this really, really easy. So no matter what option seems like it's the best for you, all you need to do is get this snippet installed in those head tags. It's very simple. It should only take a few minutes, and then you're good to go. So once you have that installed, then you'll click next, and it will tell you that you've successfully set up your basic conversion tracking. And like I said, I am going to record a separate video that walks through this in the old interface because it is a little bit different. This process has changed a little bit, so I'll put a video out there just in case you're still using that old one. Otherwise, congratulations on setting up your first conversion action, and I will see you guys in lesson 2.